All right, we have a ton of questions. We want to try to keep everything as fast as we possibly can because we've only got about 40 minutes now. I want to start with the nurses because I'm very concerned. If we don't take care of the nurses and the doctors and the ambulance and the police, the first responders, they're going to quit. Because I know if I was, exposed to it, I was getting lies, I wasn't being taken care of, and then I was blamed for causing trouble, I would say, you're on your own, I'm not going in there. So what do we have to do? What can people do? I'm not a union guy. I will march with the unions. What do we need to do to make sure that those guys are taken care of first?
Oh boy, well.
I'll let you start.
Well, I think we have to begin by eliminating the politicians from the ranks of our top health officials. I think what we have put together is a health administration which puts political considerations in front of what
now, especially with Obamacare. It's just not possible.
Right.
It's a major problem, and what we absolutely need to do is we have to find health officials that are willing to wage the battle between political correctness, wage the battle between the adequate training and rights of the medical health workers, and also think about the public health of our society. And if we don't do that, if we don't find someone, get rid of who we have now, and I'm a little nervous about saying it because it's something that I believe doctors are good people, and I believe that the people that are some of our top health officials right now, that I think that they're good people too, but I think they're in over their head. I think that they may have spent a little too much time in the bureaucracy, and they have maybe a little bit too much politician in them. And so it's time for us to, I think, change gears, perhaps.
Is there a source out there that you guys believe? Because I don't believe the CDC. Who do you believe? Who could I go to that if I'm looking for the truth, who would I go to in the medical world?
That study, University of Minnesota.
I would go to for
CIDRAP.
a lot of information, yes, I would go to the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy. It's at the University of Minnesota.
That's
it's highly
CIDRAP.
It's highly respected, and it's something that has put together, I think, a very logical plan of action for Ebola, and they aren't afraid to tell the CDC, and they're not afraid to tell the World Health Organization where they're wrong about some things. I mean, they're actually willing to state that Ebola is indeed transmissible through the air.
Yeah, we did a little bit of their work a couple of days ago. It was very good.
Glenn, I think we need to back off a little bit, though, because we've got an epidemic of panic as well as a looming epidemic of Ebola.
I think it's only panic because we don't feel like we're getting the truth.
Well, and we're not.
Yeah.
I think, for instance, CDC is putting out the information, the conventional wisdom that they've always had. But Ebola has never presented like it has now. We've never had an outbreak like this.
Well, have you guys ever read Ken? I think it's Ken Albeck.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. He was the guy who was the head of the biological weapons of Russia. Right. I mean, they found Ebola. It mutates every time it goes and jumps into a person. It can mutate. So, with 1 million people being infected or dying, we could be dealing with a new disease, could we not, in 6 months?
I don't want to overstate that.
Okay.
Viral ecology, when I said we know how the virus behaves with the virus, it's always mutating. That doesn't mean anything. It's not mutating into a form that continues to be pathogenic or gets more pathogenic. It's just the natural process and the lifestyle of viruses. I think that that's paying attention in the wrong place.
Okay.
We need to put the attention in basic public health measures. Just as Joe said, contain where it is, treat the sick, keep the well, not panic.
Any of you guys, is it defensible to say we're not sending flights over from that we should? Is it defensible to say we don't want to stop flights from West Africa? Yes, it's just yes or no. No.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Let's go up to the questions. Stu and Dan, what do you guys have?
We're at hashtag TheBlaze Ebola chat. You can get all your questions on Twitter there. I think the biggest question that we've been asked maybe overall is, we see that the health workers are contracting this disease. How is it possible that the family members of Duncan and others have not yet contracted the disease?
Who wants that?
I'll take it.
Go ahead.
It's actually not a real easy disease to catch.
That's good news.
There's a matter of it has to have real high viral load. It has to get into a susceptible host. There's a chain of infection. We're exposed to things all day long.
Right.
Your immune system handles it. So there's a lot of factors. It's not an easy one to catch when you're exposed. That's about the only good news in Ebola. It's a really nasty disease when you get it.
Okay, good. Next question.
We got one in here from Vanessa Carter. Carter wanted to know, if Ebola is carried in sneeze droplets, what's the difference between that and it being an airborne disease?
Go ahead.
Semantics, essentially. I mean, to be honest, think about it. If I had blood splatter, I'm an Ebola patient, I have blood splatter, and I go right and splat it right at you, and it goes into your nose or goes into your eyes, then you possibly could get the disease. So in a sense, it is airborne in that sense. I've just flung it through the air, and it hit you in areas that you potentially could get the disease, and it is therefore airborne. And so what I think the word really that you have to start, perhaps the phrase you have to start considering is maybe aerosol transmissible. Because now with the CIDRAP, you spoke about the CIDRAP study showing that there could be particles even from exhaled breath. And we know that it can be flung in droplets, into a nose or an open sore or your mouth or your eyes. Then there are many different ways that it can be transmitted through the air.
I'm on an airplane. I have somebody who's a nurse. She's got 100-degree fever. She has Ebola. How likely is it somebody on that plane is going to come up sick?
I don't think that they have a statistic for that, because there's been no scientific test where they put an Ebola patient on a plane.
If you were on the plane, would you be worried?
I would be terribly worried, and this is why I put this in my carry-on bag today on my way, and my N100. This was in my carry-on because this is what I would put on the patient who was sick. Meanwhile, I would be wearing the second one, okay, because I brought two. And I would put a mask on them so that they're not breathing out these particles that might get into everyone else. So I would have geared them up so that they didn't now contaminate everyone else. That's what you have to do. It's almost like putting them inside of a bubble. But you have to be in a bubble also while you're doing this, and move all the patients away. I call them patients, the people on the plane. You have to isolate yourself. Unfortunately, from the study that we were just talking about, they believe that these particles, small and large, can float around for 90 minutes. And they can be moved.
So in a tube, if you're in an airplane, that's just being recycled and blown all around.
And the particles are so small that in a still room, no air conditioning, no movement of air, it can take an hour for it to settle down. Think about when you've got those air conditioning vents inside of that airplane, moving that around.
Are they saying that this is not aerialized then?
Well, I'm going to take exception. I'm going to take exception.
That is what that study showed.
We do a risk assessment. So you asked a risk assessment question. You're on a plane, there's somebody sick, somebody's coughing, they've come in from West Africa, whatnot. Yeah, that's a very high risk for everybody on that plane. And the right answer is that passenger should not have boarded that plane.
Wow.
So there needs to be passenger screening, et cetera, et cetera. There's a particle physics answer, and Joe was starting to get to it. Airborne and aerosol particulate and whatnot. Ebola does not transmit that way. AIDS does not transmit that way. These are just functions of the natural history of the virus. Nevertheless, I always carry a disposable face mask in my carry-on luggage. And if somebody's coughing on a plane...
We're turning Japanese. We're going to... I'm returning Japanese. We're turning Japanese. I really think so. We're all going to be wearing the mask that the Japanese always wear.
They do.
I put it on the passenger who's coughing. I don't wear it.
And that's what I said. You put it on the patient who's sick.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Hang on just a sec. We just got to take a quick break.
Okay.
Be back in just a second.